Good day to everyone, and welcome to another session of our NCTR Dialogue series. My name is Sandra Bender. I'm the Community Engagement and Education Program Coordinator here with the NCTR, and I'm very pleased to introduce at least two of our three guests today. We'll see if our third arrives, but I'm here today. I'm honored to be here with Dr. Lorna Williams, Karen Kejick, and Anishinaabe, and hopefully we'll also be joined by the Right Reverend Isaiah Larry Beardy. But he's up north and sometimes has difficulty connecting to the internet, so we'll see. So our topic for today is the importance of language, language reclamation, speaking language. So I'm here with two teachers and speakers of language, and I'm going to turn it over to the two of you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll get going. So hello and welcome. Thanks for coming. Dr. Williams, would you like to introduce yourself?
Wanos nshwa teacher tilko lilwat ula shwa shnuknuk wat kanil jauna titamiksha ki lakwanina muta ihuksanich. I'm Lorna Williams, Wanos. My people are in Litluat, which is in English called Mount Curry. I live here on the lands of the Lakwanan-speaking people and the Huksanich. I'm retired. I'm from the University of Victoria, where I worked for a number of years in Indigenous languages and Indigenous knowledge. I'm chair of First Peoples Cultural Foundation currently, and the Ministers' Council on Indigenous Women.
Thank you. Karen.
How bonjour, Anishinaabe Sini Kwagan Digo Owasasi Ndotam Skateza Yaning Buntu Bisigwi in Anishinaabe King Treaty 3 territory. Nimetao Asana Nongab Iwa Njikandan Yiguachamiwan Gani Tabachamwan Iwa Picha Pitan Dagok Iwa Anishinaabe. Good day, everyone. My name is Karen Kejick, and I'm from Shoal Lake 39. It is where Winnipeg gets the water from. And I'm a proud member of the Treaty 3 Anishinaabe Nation. I'm currently employed with Treaty 2 government, working on intergovernmental relations and Anishinaabe law development.
Wonderful.
To be here today.
It's such an honor to have you both. And your land acknowledgements reminded me that I should just share where I'm sitting. You can maybe see in my background behind me the Assiniboine River in Winnipeg. I'm here on Treaty 1 lands, where we're honored to drink the water from your people's land, Karen, where our hydro is sourced from waterways throughout this province, and is the ancestral territory of so many peoples. So may I ask, what language do you both speak? And could you talk a bit about if you grew up speaking it or if you learned it later in life? Let's start there.
Okay, my language is Litluat. I grew up speaking it. Pretty much everybody in the community when I was a child spoke our language as the first language, although the people in the community spoke many languages, like all the dialects of our language and all the neighboring languages. But and then I went to residential school at age 6, and in a very short time, I pretty much lost all language and wasn't able to communicate when I went back home.
So you must have relearned it as an adult then?
No, as a child. When I got home, I as I said, I didn't have any language, but I lived in the part of our village where I was surrounded by people who pretty much had never been to school or spent short times there, and so they knew, they could see what was happening with me, and so all those old people just rallied to care for me and to help me to regain my language. But I was ill when I got home, and I was sent to the hospital for 4 months, and where I relearned, the English that I had lost and learned more. And so by the time I got back home, I was bilingual. Although at that age, at that time, I didn't know that term, and I didn't know that what I could do. But the elders, the old people around me, could see that I spoke, had relearned my English, and so if they needed to go to the doctor or to the lawyer or to the Indian agent or to the store and they needed English, they would come and get me. And so I would go, and I didn't know that's what I was doing, but they would just ask me, and then I would ask whatever they wanted to ask whoever we were talking to. And so my work with language then, I think, really began there, and having the experience of losing a language and then regaining it, and then being able to speak two languages, I think was really contributed to my understanding of what our people are going to, have been going through.
Yeah, I can only imagine. What about you, Karen? What has your experience been growing up?
Pane go gia gi nondan en shna bamwen shna ninigi go ko gin taog nishna bamog mi tishtigo ga no kum banga mi go ko gi abachitut gi gagi gitut. I just gave credit to the people who taught me, and I was very fortunate to have grown up in the language. My mother, who is now in the spirit world, my grandmother, her mother, who is now in the spirit world, and my dad, who is a residential school survivor. He was from Northwest Angle. So I also had the privilege of hearing his dialect, Gainmetsu, and I grew up in a home where Anishinaabe was the first language. And in the bay where we lived, my Guima lived across the bay, the name giver for me. So we would go over there for ceremony, pipe ceremonies, and I could understand what was being said, the prayers that were rendered. And the school, we had a very wonderful Anishinaabe teacher, Bernice Green. She taught us very well, and all the songs are still in here and in here. And the childhood nursery rhymes, and in high school we had Patricia Green, who was also married into Iskatezag, another wonderful teacher. Those are some of the masters who taught me along the way. And because of the amount of knowledge that was passed on to me by my family and the and the elders in my nation, I became very, very skilled at the language in high school. And so I won an opportunity to be an interpreter in the hospital as part of a co-op placement. So I did that, but before that, I was already doing that. I would stay with my NOCUM and my COCUM in the hospital and interpret into English for her in terms of what the doctors were saying, and I would relay information back. I mean, my siblings and I took turns sleeping bedside by my grandma. So those are some of the earlier ways I've been put to work in terms of the language, and more advanced um, opportunities came forth. The one I'll mention is the Chiefs Con, the sacred shake tent ceremony, where I was asked to interpret for hours, and that really challenged me in a good way. And everything that I've done comes from the heart. And last year, or was it the year before, there was a call out from my nation, Seven Generations Institute, who is a leader in the Anishinaabe language in terms of reclamation and education. So they had a Anishinaabe facilitator program, which was structured to bring on speakers who weren't necessarily trained in the education system on how to teach the language. So I applied, and for the first time, I was nervous because I would be tested amongst my peers and other skilled Anishinaabe speakers. And I brought out all the stops. I even sang a song at the end of my panel. And we were paneled in the language, and we had to respond to demonstrate our level of our speaking abilities. And so it was a program. It was an 8-month program, I believe. And at the end of the program, we had to find our own placement where we would teach. So I chose to bring it back to my home. I taught my niece, and the baby was there. So the reason why I wanted the baby present is because we believe the language, so it's alive. And just the Siguna like I had to do whatever I could. And so the language would flow into the baby's ear and be implanted, if you will, and alive in there. It's the best way I can explain it. So, and there was a generational process done. So, and any time somebody asks me how to say a certain phrase, I always go back to say, well, how does your family say it? Because I don't want to take away from the dialect. I also, respect others' dialects and know that everyone has a way of saying it. And I'll get into that later, but I also wanted to credit Niniseb, my brother who's passed on. His name was Mshakianakwit, and he was from the Lynx clan. And he taught me the songs and the way of ceremony. So I cannot forget to mention him today. Thank you much for asking me that question.
Mikrish, for sharing. Lorna, I believe you teach your language too, right? Or you have?
Yeah, we started our school in Mount Currie in 1972. And it was the first band-controlled school in BC. And so to begin, because this was a good opportunity, we asked the families what they wanted their children to learn. And so at the top of the list was they said our language, because by 1972 we could see that there was a real shift taking place, and there was more and more and more people who spoke only English, and that was amongst the parents, and so they were really concerned, and so that's what they told us to do. And so the school put into place right away a language program, and we started a teacher education program through Simon Fraser, focusing on our language, because our goal was to be able to have a bilingual, bicultural school. and so we needed to learn how to do that. And yeah, and so we hired a young linguist from Leiden University in the Netherlands, and to come and help us, because they were working with a man who was studying in First Nations languages in our area, in BC, and so he supported 5 of his students to come to work with different languages. And he came to work with us, and so I worked at developing all the learning resources, the curriculum, and for our language from childhood to adult. And then I also was teaching a school, so I had lots of experience on the ground. Together we worked on developing the writing system for our language, something that hadn't been done. And so it was interesting for me to see the how a language evolves, when you add another system. And because our language is an oral language, always was. And then to see how what people's experience with a written form, that was really interesting. And so we had to learn all that too. And so it was really interesting. There was really interesting work. I developed a language immersion program for my grade 6 class, and I took them to the land and brought with me expert language speakers in different areas, hunters, fishers, um, food gatherers, people who had plant knowledge, people who had knowledge of our story traditions, our songs, and that was really a good learning experience for me, to just to watch my young students get really deeply connected with their language, and because it was pretty spotty already by then, and so that was a good learning experience, and that formed kind of the basis for for what we did in the later in language immersion.
That it sounds so interesting to hear some of the parallels between your experiences already at, sort of having become translators as children without even realizing it, and then learning how to teach sort of within community, within the land, not necessarily in a university setting. What have you both found has been the experience of your students, as far as you can tell? How have they received it? Has it been difficult for them to learn?
Go ahead, Karen.
I've heard the very positive feedback during the Anishinaabe Facilitator Program. Another area that I chose to teach was Treaty 3 Police Service, to teach officers and higher levels. The former chief of police participated, and the new chief of police, who was the former deputy sergeant, I believe, also participated in the session. And there was staff there, and at any time I've taught in settings, there is this appreciation, and there's also a request for more. Right? Our people really love their language, no matter which nation you're from, and they follow their heart with it, and they want to keep going with it. And some of the feedback I've also heard was the challenge in terms of how to understand it and how to retain it. So I've said, well, you can record yourself on your phone, you can write it down phonetically, or if you know the double vowel. And again, if you have a speaker in your family, find out how your family member says it, and retain it. Cherish it and repeat yourself quite frequently in that. And I said, I've talked to myself in the language. When I used to work for the province, I'd walk home and I would be talking to myself in the language because I was lonely for it, and I thought, this may not look like, I guess to other people, right to other people that I'm talking to myself. But I thought, it's okay. It's fine if I am misunderstood, but your spirit just calls for it, right? It wants to let you know that it's there, the language spirit. So yeah.
But just practically, that's how language learning works, right? We have to say it and repeat it again, so that our brains and our hearts and our mouths remember.
Yeah, and it's the encouraging yourself to keep going. And if you have language goals, focus on those goals, right? And I like what Dr. Williams had said when she had pulled together different experts in different areas. Now that's a very valuable teaching in terms, because I don't know everything, but when I was working at home on council, I learned so much from the Fisheries Advisory Council, from the fishers, and it was a lot of traditional ecological knowledge, and even the way the term for how the water cleans itself, the different types of fish, the different areas of the lake. There's vast knowledge out there. So I've learned a lot from the fishers in my community. So I'll credit them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Lorna, I'm so curious to know how difficult it is to learn your language. I have to admit, many of the West Coast languages intimidate me greatly with their pronunciation, to my eye, pronunciation challenges. I so appreciated you teaching me the other day how to pronounce your name, and that's just one word. Have your students found it difficult to learn the language, or what has that been like for them?
Well, as was said, if they hear the language, those are the sounds that that get established in their brain. It's different for every language, no matter what language, is difficult if you're unfamiliar with a sound system. But the more you hear it, the more comfortable you are with it, because that's how our brains work. And so if you came and you immersed yourself in our language, it wouldn't be difficult for you either. English is difficult. It was difficult for me. There are sounds in English that don't exist in my language. There are sounds in your language that don't exist in my language, and vice versa. And so it's just really gaining that familiarity through hearing. So the more we can hear the language, our brains figure it out.
Yeah, that's fair. I have had both the experience of learning a second language or an additional language as an adult. I lived in Quebec for 10 years, so after the first couple, I took an immersion program. For me, I got to enter midway through, so I was in it for 4 months only, and longer would have been beneficial because then I moved to Quebec City, where the English option isn't really present. And my experience there was teaching English as an additional language for people who needed it for work. So I've sort of seen, I've been on the learning end and on the teaching end. So yeah, I was just really curious to know what your experiences with the teaching aspect of it have been, as well as the learning. You both mentioned residential schools, and of course, we know what an interruption that whole devastating thing did for Indigenous language speaking, with people losing their language at school, and needing or wanting to come back to it later. I know I have a friend, an ex colleague, who teaches Cree here at Red River College in Winnipeg. And she tells me that her classes are full semester after semester, and it's the 20 somethings who are sometimes the first in 3 or 4 generations in their families who are learning their ancestral languages again for the first time. I was curious to know who is coming to your language classes. Is it younger folk? Is it residential school survivors who are trying to come back to it? Why is it important for people, or is it important for people to come back to it? That was a lot of different questions at once. Karen, would you like to speak to that? We're talking about some of the people who have taken your classes. Is it just people who need to take it for work, or has it been others as well?
Well, I think we're students at heart, right? And people are seeking knowledge. And I won't name a specific age group, because I feel that when you're a knowledge keeper, and other knowledge keepers can attest to this, if you are in a conference setting, if you are in a room, and you have the opportunity to speak the language, people will approach you. I've had questions inside the office in terms of how to say different words, phrases. And so it's an opportunity that can happen anytime, from children. How do you say this? Or like they will ask, and the important thing is to be really approachable and be ready for it. And sometimes we get caught off guard sometimes with certain words, and this is when you use your referral system, which I like. Other language speakers in your network. But I find it depends on the issue, or the question that one person has. Whether it's their Anishinaabe name, for some reason, they want to know the spelling of it, right? Yeah, I mean, those questions can come at any time from all different age ranges outside of a structured classroom setting.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because although I began teaching young people, most of my work has been teaching adults, not just teaching the language, but it's teaching people from all over the planet who are trying to bring their language back. So I teach it. So I taught the last part of my career was at the University of Victoria, where I developed 2 degrees on a bachelor's degree and a master's degree on Indigenous language revitalization. And so I'm in touch with people who are working on their languages.
And why would you both say that it's important for people to learn their languages?
I believe in the nationhood. I believe in nationhood, and the spirit of people, right? The spirit of the language, the spirit of the family, and being able to communicate with our relatives, the trees, and it's who we are. in terms of Anishinaabe and Nakwanigawen, structuring the Anishinaabe legal traditions has to be in the language, and it is in the language, and the laws can be found, um, told in the language. So there's rules and there's structures, Anishinaabe legal principles that live in the language, and the language is alive. And when we say we got to keep it alive just by speaking it, thinking about it. And language is important to ceremony. Ceremony is important to language, and the language also helps bring people together, in a good way. And there's so much, beautiful relationships formed because of the language. You have your language network, and you have the people that are there to help keep it alive, right? We can't forget about them and make those spaces for them. And there's it's important also to invest in the language. One of the questions I heard from a former teacher was, how much are we investing in the language? We invest in all these other capacity building opportunities. And when do we shut down community just for the language? We have Indigenous Languages Day, I believe, here in Canada. And that's a great reminder to focus on the language. We gotta make the effort to use the language every day. And it's there's so mmany resources out there. There's books, there's this YouTube video maybe. There's tons of videos out there. There's Rosetta Stone now, I believe, that's being used with my relatives in Kejick King, which is on the state side. And reaching out to those people that have the language, bringing your sama, and also praying for your own healing, right? Your own healing and everything that you're carrying in terms of the trauma as well that's associated with how the language has been treated, not by us right now, right? Because we're still having to heal that as we go, and it is definitely a challenge because we're dealing with also those traumas as teachers, because somebody will come and they'll be carrying something, and they'll need to release it, right? And so what I found was a good way to help with that was having a healing song ready to help, and so again, that the ceremony and the language go hand in hand, and to think positively, right? I was getting excited to be here today. I was like, I get to speak about the language, and we have a whole hour to speak about this. It's a really good opportunity. Yeah.
Well, it's such an important topic, I feel. I think it's still shocking to people to learn that the actual legal ban on speaking Indigenous languages was only lifted as recently as the early 50s, 1951, I believe. So it's not surprising, maybe, that people are not necessarily growing up with their languages or looking to reclaim them because there was that break in tradition.
Well, there might have been a ban that lifted in 51, but the practice continued and continues. Because in Canada, French and English, the two colonizing languages, are the languages, the official languages. And there's right now in Quebec, you talked about learning over there. Mm-hmm. Well, they're continuing and working hard to silence all the Indigenous languages in that province.
Yeah.
And so why is it important? It's important because it's our identity, and it helps us to know who we are and it informs who we are. When you think about language, for example, there's lots more connected to language than just the sounds of the words. And there's the whole social system of a people is in the language. And so when you think about, for example, French and English, it's very status oriented, it's very hierarchical, and that is embedded in the language. And so it's so that way of thinking of each other, that that we're in a hierarchy, you're better than me, is embedded in the language, and that's not in our language.
Mm.
And so even the way that we that we use pronouns really attributes to that to that sense of hierarchy. And so there's a lot more in language than just the sounds of words or the words themselves. It's what's embedded in there. It's the way that this language is structured. It's the way that language is used within a community, within a family, between people.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add to that, and you watch for that. My neurons are just firing as you're speaking. And she's absolutely, Dr. Williams is absolutely right. And I was thinking about the governance structure. We have Tutem, Anapunigay, and the clan governance structure, and there's checks and balances that we've had and still have within our roles and responsibilities. And no clan is higher than the other, right? In terms of the language and the way the clan governance system is structured. So yeah, maybe actually just triggered something in my mind to share.
Good.
Well, no two languages are exactly equivalent, right? Even sort of sister languages that are very close to each other, there's no such thing as a language grid where one word means exactly the exact same thing as another word quite often, right? We lose some nuances, or some nuances are gained, or something, but no two languages are exactly the same. So it makes sense that concepts can be embedded in the very language itself. I'm curious, I can think, especially with my knowledge of French too, I can think of what you mean about the hierarchy, Dr. Williams, but could you maybe give us an example?
Well, I was talking about the pronouns. It's for example, when you see texts written and for a long time, both in English and in French, it was male oriented. And so the whole structure of the sentence, was structured from a male orientation. The other thing is that so that then when you would write things, you would always put them, male first and then the female below. And the other is that and so there's lots of things like within the language that points to hierarchy.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
you like you like the whole in French, I think there's a plural you and plural singular, and
yeah, one is more formal and one is less formal.
Yeah.
But I've heard of languages that say don't have a concept of, like, that don't have a term, say, for forgiveness as a concept. I don't remember exactly which language that is, but it's just there is no term for it, which maybe means that there is no concept for it culturally, or other things that I might have a word for the color gray, and that might just not exist in another place. So there is no word for it. So yeah, that embedding of language as culture is so inextricably tied together, right?
Well, in that example, though, you have to be careful with it to say, like that there isn't a concept or there isn't a term, because there may be another one, and there may
Sure.
be, it may be that the cultural pattern is that people are so focused on not ever having to ask for forgiveness. And so the whole structure of the relationship and the way that you treat one another, the way that it might be to avoid ever having to ask for forgiveness. So
Absolutely.
you can't. That's hard to, just because it doesn't. Maybe a term doesn't exist, doesn't mean that the idea of forgiveness isn't there.
Sure, absolutely.
When I think about pagitnamuin, it's a part of a healing process that relates to the individual themselves, right? And the way you envision how people envision forgiveness in the context in which it's been said. Often people have said, "Well, you need to forgive," right? And that is that is very different to how pagitnamuin is like the letting go part. How the Anishinaabe way of thinking and being, uh, in terms of how I understand what I need to do to get to that place of, what it's a whole process in itself, right? The stages of your own stages, whether it's grief or whether it's something you've done in your past, and you're doing it for your own healing, right? And that to me is really important in terms of the well-being. Mina ana gituin, right? This is how we say, I guess, and it's sometimes a challenge for me to try to come up with the best English word in terms of how to interpret it. And somebody will say, "Well, we say it this way." I'm like, "Okay, okay, fine. You interpret it that way in English, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to make sense to them, and this is how it makes sense to me." And you're doing the best you can to remain focused on the goal. Okay, well, this is what I mean by it, because your message you're teaching, your Kejick may resonate. And then, as Dr. Williams was talking about hierarchical language, when I think about how we say teaching or Anishinaabe legal principle, and Kejick when I break it down, and I'm not a linguist, right? But I understand. I have this understanding about what that word means and the context. And I know that sometimes, and it's alive, so it can be used in different contexts as well. So when I think of Kejick, when I look at the word ikwe is in there, which is woman, right? And then that's a teaching in itself. Kejick and then win is a way of life, and Kejick is forever. Kejick, whenever we say that, right? And when you break it down, yeah, it looks choppy, but this is where then there's more questions that arise sometimes, and you do your best to try to build that understanding. But when I'm listening in the language, right, and I'll say that I'm privileged to know and thankful that I can understand it when the knowledge keepers are sharing with that, and the importance of women in the language, right? I mean, everybody has a role, and everybody's important, and the teachings that also come with it, and the English language could also take away its meaning, right? Say my Anishinaabe name, for instance, is Anishinaabe Quince, right? But it's changed over time, and the original meaning is Nisanabe Quince. Nisanabe Quince is, and it goes back to the Pogonagish teaching, the astral configurations of the hole in the sky from which we were lowered from.
Mm-hmm.
And then conversation that I had, and it's what's your aning Shinakazuin, aning Shnabe Shinakazuin? Well, what's your Indian, your Indian name, right? People ask that. Oh, when kinigi gog, andin jin, and then or do you belong to a lodge? Things like that. They're asked because they're trying to figure out who you are, who your identity is. Right. And you can share those, and there's that instant connection. But it's the and then in the English language, you walk into a room and you're asked, oh, hi, and what do you do? And there's so there's differences there, and as a teacher and a forever student, forever curious about it, I do my best to try to navigate and say, yes, you want to understand, and the best thing is to focus on how to pronounce the word itself, right? To share it, to feast it, and yes, you want to do your best to understand it through the English language, but you got Nick and on. You'll begin to retain and build your knowledge with Shaman.
I think you've expressed so much better than than what I was trying to say about the very concept of concept being contained in languages that don't translate. That's what I really love. I just want to slide him in here. I'm so pleased to see that Bishop Isaiah Beardy has been able to join us. So I'm just going to bring him in here. So hello, Isaiah. So glad that you could come. So glad that this worked out. We're about 10 minutes from the end, but would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, Tansi. I'm on the road right now, but I'm parked inside my vehicle. I'm on my way to Calgary. I'm in Yorkton, Saskatchewan.
Wow.
Right now. But anyway, I can join the discussion today.
You're in the discussion. We are live streaming.
Yeah, I'm able to join. Yeah.
Would you like to tell us a bit about the language that you speak, and if you grew up speaking it?
Yeah, I'm from Tatasquia, Split Lake, Manitoba. I'm from a community along the Nelson River. We're northeast of Thompson. And I was born in Churchill, Manitoba, along the Hudson Bay coast. But anyway, I grew up in an oral tradition, speaking the Ininimwin, Ginanimut Nikawi, Egomina no Tawi. I grew up with my parents, my mother and father, and we only spoke the Cree language in an oral tradition, in an oral traditional culture. We 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 never spoke any other language when I was growing up. So it's Cree, the term that is being used. Cree language. Sometimes we'll refer to as the Big Bay Cree or the Muskego people from the Muskeg or the Swampy Cree. That's where I learned my language, and I was from infant to about 8 years old. I grew up in an oral tradition in northern Manitoba. I didn't know any other language, so that's where I'm from. That's who I am.
Thank you. I wonder, before we wrap up, if you would each like to share what the most beautiful thing is about your experience in your own language, or something just beautiful about your language, whatever you like. Dr. Williams, would you like to start? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I don't really understand your question.
This is a question that Karen suggested. So maybe Karen, if you want to start. Yeah, something beautiful about the way speaking or teaching your language has been, or just something beautiful about your language that you'd like to share.
I
Well,
love how the Anishinaabe provides a sense of healing for me. It has healing energy, healing powers, and the way the gift that was given to us by Gijaminatu. It's a gift from Creator, and I love how our people are honored through the language. Our way of life is honored through the language, and I want to take some time to I'll hold my feathers while I'm doing this. Honor all the Anishinaabe teachers in Treaty 3, all of the language teachers across Turtle Island that are doing what they can to protect our way of life. I support them, and they're in their classrooms. And my brother Kejick and my brother David Kejick is also a Anishinaabe teacher, and they've devoted their lives to teaching. They've taken the time to learn how to teach the language, and I love how also when I'm asked to write in the language in the double vowel system, that we have a system to do that. And I love how our Anishinaabe Beneg also were writing. They were writing on birch bark scrolls, and I love how there's rock paintings out there to remind us that our ways of life were also in written form. It's been an honor to be here today, Chimigwech, for the Asama, for the tobacco offering, and I lit a smudge earlier, and it's been a really great opportunity, Miigwech, for your teachings as well, Dr. Williams. Keep them here, Miigwech.
Well, I think what's beautiful about my language and the use of my language is just how it brings people together. And I think in the world that we live in, it's really important to have that sense of community, that sense of connectedness, that sense of togetherness. And when I'm in the use of my language, that's what I can see. I can see the connections, not just to the people who are in the room at the time, but connections to the ancestors and all the beings that that are with us, and in the language you can people, there's so much likeness and together, and oftentimes there's so much laughter, and it's the language is more than just the words.
Absolutely. Isaiah, is there something you'd like to share about what's beautiful about Cree?
Well, I can only recollect when I was a child living on the land with my parents and my granny, my grandparents. Uh, I always can remember uh, my mother or even my aunties. They would sing many lullabies, and I remember if you ever hear that lullaby, say me 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 me, and they would rock the baby or the infant in the arms, or even in a swing or a hammock, and that sound, it comes from creation. If you ever see a butterfly would sway like meh meh meh, like that. You would see it swaying as it glides through the air, and that's where language comes from. A butterfly in Cree is a memekwe, like meh meh kwe, and 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 a lot of our language is it comes from the land, the creation, and 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 language in Cree is it's translated amplified sound. That's what it says. Is Kiswewin. That's what language is translated in Cree. It's a Kiswedawina. It amplifies the sound, and that's where language comes from. So language is there. It's never lost. It's there for people to experience. Anyway, I thought I would share that about my language.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think this brings us to about the end of our hour. So that went by so quickly. Thank you three so much for what you've shared with folks today. Thanks for the concepts that you've brought to the forefronts of our minds and spirits again. Yeah, and Karen, I especially really love what you've said about how language is living, and that language has its own spirit. And by speaking, we are engaging with that spirit. That's one of the things I'll take away. And many of your words, Dr. Williams, will live in my heart too. I look forward to feeling them unfold and to keep expanding in my own understanding of language and what it means and what it is.
This is could I sing a song before we close off?
Yeah.
It's a short lullaby, and I gifted the song to the Abenonjiog of Anishinaabe in Ontario. So it goes like this: Kishwanamin, Kishwanamin, Apatigagi Metswanamin, Ginamachayan, Giandanukian, Meanwhile Piagawabamin. That's a song I made for the children.
I love it. It's catchy.
Yeah,
Next time we have tea, you'll have to sing it again for me.
for sure.
Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.